Is it okay for Christians to read other religious holy books?
Where America is in Bible prophecy.
Women becoming pastors and
anointing homes and praying over homes.
Why would God have people tormented and burned for eternity?
What happened or where Jesus went after he died?
What is your opinion? What does the Bible say?
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. And now here's today's host, Brian Perez.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pastor's Perspective program. We are here to do what we do every day at this time, and that's answer the questions you have about the Bible, Christianity, other religions and cults and things of that nature. In the studio to answer those questions are Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Absolutely. Doing good.
Yeah.
Now, last Thursday, we were speaking with a young lady named Wendy from Virginia. She called in towards the end of the program, so that was on Thursday, so we asked her to hold on and ask her question right from the beginning so that we can start over. So let's go to Wendy right now. Hey, Wendy, what is your question for us today on Pastor's Perspective?
Hello. So as far as the relationship with Jonathan and David was concerned, can you help me to understand the context in which Saul was made so mad in 1 Samuel 20:30, he is seemingly accusing Jonathan of choosing David, the son of Jesse, to the confusion of his mother's nakedness, which, without understanding the context of the day and what was going on, it seems to sound like with that and also the Jonathan and David kissing and him stripping off his clothes and giving him things, it seems to sound like there was and not a good relationship as far as what God intended relationships to be. It sounds like it could possibly be somewhat homosexual, but can you help me understand that relationship and those passages in their context?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. We're happy to do that. Bob, you want to jump in on that? Or
sure. I mean, this has been something that's been brought up before, and I do think there's a difference between exegesis and eisegesis. Exegesis is to draw out of the text, and eisegesis is to read into the text. And I think that as it relates to the homosexual community, if they're looking for something to validate maybe homosexuality in the Bible, this is one of the places that they'll go to. But we really need to understand that David was passionate about the Mosaic law, and he clearly understood the Mosaic law, that it's an abomination for a man to lie with another man, as the scriptures teach in the book of Leviticus. So David is also we're told to be a man after God's own heart. Think about how much and how many consequences David received for his sin with Bathsheba. If he had those consequences for his sin with Bathsheba, if there was a sexual relationship going on with Jonathan, do you think he would have been next to take over the kingdom? Wouldn't there have been tons of consequences that would have come David's way? Of course. So the reason Saul struggled so much with David is because he was threatened by David, because David was anointed to be the king. And remember, when David took out Goliath, it was said that, Saul has killed his thousands, but David is tens of thousands. So he had jealousy toward him. And then exasperating that jealousy was the fact that Jonathan was a very close friend of David's. A kiss, just if you ever watch on TV too, you'll see Middle Eastern customs. They'll kiss each other, and that looks weird to us, but that's very normal in a Middle Eastern context. So we can't impose anything sexual upon something like a holy kiss that could be given to one another. But when we don't understand the milieu from which the scripture is written, we can impose our westernized eyes on that context, and then we can end up with some interpretations that I would say are more eisegetical versus exegetical in nature.
Right.
What do you think, Wendy?
It makes a whole lot of sense. The only other thing is, though, why why does it say he loved him as more than he would like a love a woman? I can't find the verse exactly, but you know which one I'm talking about. Can you explain that verse and what it means realistically in modern day? So,
yeah. Again, we have to take the sexualized language or ideas out of the language. It's just describing that David and Jonathan had a deep, deep friendship, and that there was a connection with them that wasn't physical, it wasn't sexual. It was just a deep bond in their spirits. They were, like a blood brothers kind of an idea, And so, and then, you talked about the passage where he stripped off his clothing. Jonathan was the prince, but Jonathan knows that David's going to be the king. Jonathan is constantly acknowledging that God. He says to David at one point, he says, "I know you're going to be the king in the place of my father, and I want to be right beside you. I want to rule with you." And so,
that also explains why he bows down to him often.
Yes, and he gave him his weapon after he killed Goliath. He put his robe on him. That was all to honor David. It had nothing to do with anything sexual.
You know what I
didn't think so. I just wanted to be able to give an account for what I believe.
Yeah. No, it's good because those ideas, and you do find in the gay literature that they go make a beeline to that relationship to try to support, the idea that the Bible is okay with homosexual relations.
Yeah, good point.
Wendy, thanks for your question. Here's one from Renee in Massachusetts, similar to Wendy's question. I recently heard from another Christian who says the Antichrist will be a homosexual. I would love to know your thoughts on this. What do you guys know?
I haven't heard that one. Have you, Pastor Brian?
Yeah, I have. There's a reason, a scriptural reason.
Interesting.
Remember, in Daniel, it says that he, as it's describing him in Daniel, it says that he does not honor the God of his fathers, nor the love of women. So because of that, there's been that insinuation that maybe that is a reference to homosexuality. The other possibility is that he, I guess that is a possibility, but I think most people would think that that's more of a reference to him not being married and him being, he's all about his role. He's consumed entirely with the worship of his God, which we know from Revelation is Satan, and giving honor and glory to him alone.
Even interesting as we think about the caller just a moment ago, bringing up the relationship between Jonathan and David, because, he loves David more than the love of a woman. How many married couples are out there that have friends that they would say, man, I wish that my relationship to my spouse was my closest relationship. But a wife might say, my best friend is a girlfriend, and I love her more than the love of a man, or vice versa. I really think that that's kind of the context. We have to be careful that we just don't we're in such a sexualized culture. It's just shocking that people will come up with an interpretation as the Antichrist. Maybe the Antichrist will be a homosexual because he's not going to be thinking about the pathway of God or concerned about following and God's plan for sexuality. It wouldn't surprise me, but interesting thoughts.
Yep. Renee, thanks for sending that in on Facebook.com/pastorsperspective. All right, let's see. Let's go next to Anne calling us from Westminster. Hello, Anne. How can we help you today on Pastor's Perspective?
Well, I have a situation with a grown daughter who lives with me and her husband and my grandson also. We also have a roommate that she does not get along with who used to be a spouse, and I've let him stay there in his own room because he had a heart attack 7 years ago and can no longer work. I have become his caregiver through the state of California, and I also work. I'm working 3 jobs, as a matter of fact. And, they do not get along. I let my daughter and her husband and grandson move in 2 years and 9 months ago because they wanted to save money for a home. And the hatred around there has escalated between these two. Now, I've tried to speak to my daughter about, the anger and the hatred and not repaying people evil for evil, like Romans says, and, live peaceably with all. But she absolutely refuses. And this is the person who's disabled and not well.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this isn't good in God's eyes that you attack someone.
Now, did you say this was her ex-husband?
This is my ex.
Your ex-husband, okay.
Yes. And I have allowed him to stay there because when we were breaking up, it was 4 months later that he had this heart attack 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And out of the goodness of, believing in helping people, I've let him stay. And at that time, he had no income until he got Social Security disability.
Yeah, so is this your daughter's husband or a stepfather? Or
No, this is not her father. No, her father passed away many, many years ago.
Got it. All right. Brian, what would you tell Ann?
Is your daughter a Christian?
Yes, she actually went to Maranatha for quite a while, but she is not really latching on to what Jesus wants us to.
Yeah.
She just has kind of gone her own way with her thinking. I know she believes, and I know that she committed her heart a long time ago when she was a teenager. She's 43 now.
Yeah.
And, it's just a battleground, and almost like the enemy is trying to get to me.
Yeah.
Through her.
So do you guys all live under the same roof? Is that the situation?
We do.
Okay.
We do.
And
she has wanted me, Brian, to give him a notice to move out.
Yeah. And
I'm considering.
How's his attitude toward her? Is he equally
the same way with her?
Way.
They both are, just hate each other.
Yeah.
There's no other way to,
Yeah.
And I feel like, is it okay, when I promised him he could stay, for me to give him a notice to move?
Well, did you say that he's been there 7 years? Did you say he's been there 7 years?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, that's
and deteriorated, since then.
Yeah, that's a pretty long stay. I mean, I think that maybe the time's up.
It could be. Yes.
Yeah,
And,
I think.
I really.
Yeah,
I really just.
If it was one-sided, if it was just your daughter had this really bad problem and she was super angry and, malicious toward the person who was kind and gentle and loving, that would be one thing. But I think, that there's a mutual hostility and hatred between the two of them. I mean, you don't want to be stuck trying to referee between these two people. And it might be just time for him to move now and to just go on with the rest of his life. And you can go on with your life as well. I would think that that's a possibility for sure.
Does he have somebody else who can take care of him, Ann, since he's disabled?
Not exactly. Not around here. I mean, I have a daughter in Hawaii, and he does have a son and a sister in Oregon. His mother and father are in their late 80s, and they're not well, and they live out by Kingman, Arizona. It isn't like he doesn't have anyone. He has a stepdaughter here, too, from his first marriage.
And when you say he's disabled, what does that mean? That he's not able to work?
Well, he's had 2 heart attacks. No, he cannot work. No.
But can he get around?
Yes,
can he function?
He does go in a wheelchair, electric wheelchair that he has, is how he usually gets around. He doesn't drive anymore.
Yeah.
He's in his 60s, 62. Yeah. And, his life is pretty small.
Yeah. Now, okay, one other question. Do you talk to him? I mean, you mentioned talking to your daughter about her attitude. Do you talk to him about his attitude toward her?
Ann, are you there? Ann? Did you press mute on your phone? Ann, are you there?
So I would just say this. Let's just, we'll answer it, and then we'll move on. because, I mean, these are big decisions that we can't make for Ann. But I don't know. I would just think, wouldn't it be nice if you could just sit down and have a powwow and say, hey, listen, we can't live like this. This is really not a good situation. So we got to get it together, or something has to change. And, it sounds pretty challenging for him to move out based on what you just said, but it's not impossible. And maybe that's the route that you need to try to help him get into a new living situation. Maybe not. I mean, if your daughter got saved and he got saved, then things could really change. And, it's amazing how people choose misery over joy and peace, but they do all the time. And so, Jesus is right there waiting to come into lives and to change things, change hearts, but we have to welcome him in. He's not going to force his way in. So, you can keep praying that God would soften their hearts, but we know that doesn't always happen, right?
Yep. All right, Ann, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Brian Broderson and Bobby Conway here to answer questions you guys have. Here is one from Timothy in Phelan, which I think we all are going to feel the same way Timothy does. Timothy, what is your dilemma?
Guys, I really need some encouragement, some advice. So I'm super passionate about politics. I'm super passionate about these things going on in the world today, Breonna Taylor, all these things. And I know a lot of facts. A lot of people don't look up the facts before they react. But my passion for these things is really affecting my marriage. My walk with Christ isn't necessarily the best, but I know 100% I'm going to heaven when I die. But this passion for these things are, they are affecting my marriage, they're affecting my relationships, but I can't seem to stop wanting to learn information. Now, I also feel like being informed is a good thing. I mean, I know that these things going on, like the laws that are changing, the new one in California, with the underage that have to go before a judge, and the judge is the one that makes the decision on that. I think it's good to be, I know there needs to be a right balance. I understand that. But I'm not able to make the decision to do the right balance on what I should look into, what I shouldn't look into. And I need to listen to you guys more often than my Joe Pags on 960. So I fight those things too. But and the Lord actually just delivered me from looking at pornography. That's been huge, and such a weight was lifted, man. I talked to my wife about it, and just He's definitely working on me. But my heart's been affected, you guys. For instance, my wife was telling me a story about how her friend was, saying how she's not appreciating the police right now, and kind of went off on it. And instead of back in the day, I would have been like, oh man, that's really sad. I was like, F her, she doesn't understand what's, defunding the police and what that's all about and this and that. So it's a heart issue too. I got a major heart issue, and, I pray a lot, and, my wife doesn't think that I'm closer to the Lord, but I am. I mean, I need to read my word more. But, I'm just really struggling not to listen to all this garbage out there, because I'm really worried, too, that it's really getting closer to the end times with all these laws that are changing and,
Quick question, Timothy.
What do you guys think? Is there...
you say this is affecting your marriage. Is it because your wife disagrees with you politically, or just because you're so consumed with it that she's just had it?
She is 100% on board with everything I believe in, but she has flat out told me, the way that you are about it is, I literally want to vote for Joe Biden because, you're so mean about it. You're so, it's either your view or nobody's view, or, you know what I mean? So it's affecting her that way. And I used to have, I've always said I had, back in the day, my heart was more different than anybody's heart that the Lord, gave, because I was so compassionate. I was so... and the Lord, I literally went to so many conventions, and the people would tell me, they would be like, guard your heart.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you guys advise to Timothy?
Well, I would advise something that's really, really simple, Timothy, and that is you turn off the news. Literally turn it off.
Turn off the guy on 960 as well, Joe something.
Yeah, and you need to get right with Jesus. This is This is the root of the problem. You admitted it. You're not denying that, you're not where you should be with God. You've been wrapped up in pornography. Thank God, you're free from that. But all of this other stuff is all just, these are different manifestations of the flesh. Strife, contention, those, if you look in Galatians chapter 5, where Paul describes the works of the flesh, sexual immorality is there, but all of this other stuff is there too. Pride and strife and contention and divisions, that's all part of the flesh. And you are just operating in the realm of the flesh. And the news cycle is feeding that. So you're getting this constant feeding of the flesh, and you're neglecting your spiritual life because you're consumed by these other things. You just need to get out of the news cycle, pick up your Bible, start seeking the Lord, and start praying, because the best thing you could do in regard to the politics and the state of the nation and the election coming up, the best thing you can do beside going down and casting your vote, and that's not even the best thing you can do, the best thing you can do is pray and ask God to intervene, ask God to work, and you got to learn to just leave things in God's hands, because you can't, you're just going to drive yourself and everybody else crazy by the approach that you're taking. And in the end, you can't do anything about it anyway. I mean, you might persuade one person to have your political view, but in the process, you've alienated 100 other people, like your wife is saying. She wants to vote for Biden just because of your obsession over this and all. So my recommendation, and Bobby, you can weigh in with your recommendation. My recommendation is turn off the news, period. You can get informed really easily by just reading a few headlines a day and okay, this is what's going on, and then you can pray about that. But we're living in a season where obviously the culture is totally politicized like it's never been before, and the news cycle is feeding that. And I was just telling Brian and Bobby a few minutes ago, I was listening to a friend in Australia, and he was saying the craziest thing that's happened in the world right now is that the American political thing is dominating and dwarfing the news in every other country, because where we used to export our movies from Hollywood and our music and all of those kinds of things, now we export 24/7 news. So that's the cultural influence that America's having on the world. And people in Australia and people in different countries are thinking, the average person's like, why, when I turn on the news, do I just hear about America? I don't live in America. But they're being inundated with our craziness. So it's affecting the whole planet. And do yourself a favor, do your wife a favor, pull yourself out of that. You will be better for it, because your marriage is way more important. Your family is way more important. And you can do something about that. And your spiritual life is most important. You can do something about all of that. You can do little to nothing about the political situation.
And if you're watching us on Australia, we're sorry. We're sorry for what's going on. Bobby, what are your thoughts?
We agree with Mark Sayers. It's an unfortunate situation.
It's tough. As I was listening, I think that it's a question that I would ask. If I was sitting with you, Timothy, I think there'd be a part of me wondering, are there any OCD tendencies? Now, you might think, what the heck how are you coming at that element in this? And I don't know, just a gut thing that I would be wanting to ask you to consider if there's any obsessive tendencies. When there's OCD tendencies, then the person becomes overwhelming. And it sounds like you're potentially overwhelming your wife and maybe overwhelming others. And some of that could be rooted in OCD, and OCD can latch on to politics. The danger is if you're not aware that and again, I'm speaking as if it is this, and I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying consider that if there's some OCD tendencies, that even if you did what Pastor Brian says, if it is OCD, then you're going to latch on to something else. And it could be prayer, and you'll start overwhelming people because of your like your prayer life, or you're going to be I had to make a commitment to my wife when we were younger and we were dating. I became so obsessed with evangelism that my wife said, "Can you just make a commitment that we're on a date that you won't witness?" Now, that could sound like, how dare she do that? Well, I was constantly witnessing, like the waiters, waitresses, my wife just felt like, I want you into me for a little bit. That's great that you're into the gospel. Well, she was catching this OCD tendency that I have that could shift from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. So I would just say, for me, then the solution sometimes is just to be aware of, am I being a little bit compulsive on this? And is that overwhelming people around me? How can I be alert to that and to dial that back? That's just one thing. I'm not saying it's that, but if it is, be aware. I also could say, I felt anxious as you were talking. Now, that could sound like what the heck? How could you feel anxious as I was talking? And that, so, because I'm sharing with you why I'm wondering if there's something of an OCD coupled with the people feeling overwhelmed and anxious because you're trying to get so much out in such a short period of time. So I'd say just dial back, slow down, and just enjoy the Lord. Now, we love you, Timothy. We're glad you called. And I would say, as Brian said, just go rest in the Lord. Hey, and if anything I'm sharing's off, who knows? My discerner could be way out there. Then just chuck it in the garbage and say the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm cool with that.
But it wouldn't hurt to fast
40 days.
Fast until
well, the election is like
November the 4th.
Yes, that's
right.
Don't watch the news until November the 4th.
That's right.
No, it's crazy. And, Timothy's responding and reacting one way, but this is like overwhelming people. And people are, people are really, it's heavy and it's depressing.
Yeah.
And it causes you to be anxious and filled with fear and all of this stuff. That's understandable if there is no God.
Yes.
And it's going to be the case if you're not looking to the Lord. But since there is a God and we can look to him, we can alleviate a lot of that by trusting him. This is what it means to trust the Lord. We have no guarantee that the political situation is ever going to normalize or stabilize or get any better than it is right now. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. We hope it happens. We certainly should pray that it happens, but we don't know that it will happen. I'm going to teach on Sunday at the end of Colossians, and I was just telling Cheryl today, there's 10 names that Paul mentions in Colossians in the last few verses, and 4 of those names were fellow prisoners with him for the gospel. And you think, man, it was commonplace in the New Testament period. These guys preached the gospel, thrown in prison, were in prison for periods of time, got released, went out, continued the mission, got arrested again, thrown in prison again. It's like, hey, that's the world. It's a world that's against God. And so...
yeah, these are definitely some trying times. And you do great at that. Like when I talk to you, I mean, you see me, I can be a little bit anxious at times. And I'd want Timothy, I don't want him to feel picked off in this. I mean, I think some of it is hearing myself, like in moments where I get anxious. And I know that I can, just get so overwhelmed sometimes by life that my wife, like, calm down, hon. So, I just would want to give Timothy a big hug and say, hey, bud, this is great. You got a lot of passion. It's coming through, but just slow down, focus it, rest in the Lord. And Pastor Brian is always doing a great job of just, for me, I know if I feel anxious, reminding me, shalom, bro. Right? Shalom.
Yeah. And then I do have to remind myself, shalom, bro, too. Because I can get, this stuff can get me worked up, too.
Me worked up, too.
So I intentionally stay away. I just don't go to news sites like I used to. I just don't do it. It's just like the little bits and pieces that are important that I need, I can pick up here and there without getting into the weeds of every single thing, So, man,
it used to be so much easier to stay informed, didn't it?
Yeah. The worst thing is going on the news sites at night because you're getting ready for bed, and then you say,
you know what? Real quick,
let me catch up on what happened today.
But I seriously, I noticed this years and years ago. I started noticing, though, that like on 24-hour news stations, it's the same story over and over again. So you watch it, you go through the cycle of events for the day, and then you go into, maybe a sports thing for a few minutes, and you go into the weather, and then boom, you're right back to the same story again, and there's just a slightly different twist on it, so you got to stay in there and watch it. And then, 8 hours have passed and you've just watched the same thing over and over and over and over
That's why
again.
sometimes it's good when a car chase interrupts everything and it's just like, oh, let's just watch this for 3 hours.
Yeah.
All right, Timothy, thanks for your call today. We've got a similar question and lots of other stuff coming up here on Pastor's Perspectives. Stay where you are.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues. And now, here's today's host, Brian Perez.
All right, thanks so much for joining us on the Pastor's Perspective program. In the studio today with Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. Also author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. Right before the break, we were speaking to Tim in Phelan about his obsession with news and how he needs to break free from that. And then Bobby got anxious because of a story that he saw recently, and he wants us to get on board with him too.
Yeah.
And it's important. Go ahead.
Well, you think of Timothy and what he's sharing, and then Brian's like, stay away from the news, and I'm sitting here, being aware of a feed coming through, and I thought, wow, this is scary stuff.
Yeah, and this was on the Christian Post on Thursday. It says just 2% of millennials hold a biblical worldview, the lowest among all adults. 2% of 2%.
And here's the
that's our
crazy
future.
Thing. It also says 61% of millennials would identify as Christian, but if only 2% have a Christian worldview, no wonder there's so much confusion when it comes to things like maybe the LGBTQ and all of that. They claim to believe in Jesus, and many of them probably do, but they don't have a worldview by which to assess the different issues of our day. I mean, what do you think about that, Pastor Brian? How important is it for pastors out there to start equipping these emerging millennials on worldview issues?
Yeah. Bobby, the first thing I wanted to say, shalom.
Shalom, bro.
Hey, don't be OCD about this right now.
I'm passing on some shalom to you right now. Well, I mean, yes, this is, the 61% of millennials who claim to be Christian is the most concerning if 2% of them only believe in a biblical worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. And what do we got to do about that? Well, first of all, we got to pray that God will pour out His Spirit and just, turn people's hearts toward Himself, because it's obviously a spiritual state that they're in. The God of this age has blinded the minds of those who do not believe. We recognize that there is a deception that's over most people today, and that generation as well. And then I think we need to do our job. We need to do our job as pastors and preachers and youth ministers to really teach the Bible and to get people grounded in the Word of God and to equip them. I mean, this has been an ongoing problem for some time. I mean, these stats are alarming, but the problem of kids going to church, going to Sunday school, going to youth group, and then at the end going to university and basically ditching everything. Yeah. And there's a number of reasons why that happens, and also some of those kids come back to the faith. But one of the reasons is because they've not been equipped to face the world that they go out into, because in their Sunday school and in their youth group, they spent the whole time playing games and having fun and never really taking the Bible seriously. So, we've been fighting against that for years and trying to always make sure that our youth leaders and ministry leaders are really educating, people in the Scriptures. But I do think, Bobby, to some degree, though, it's just a sign of the times, really, isn't it? I mean, it's just one of those times where unbelief is in the air. It's like the air we breathe.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, so
I think there are some tools that are out there that can be helpful for students.
Yeah.
Summit, Worldview, is a great place. Summit Ministries. I'm one of the teachers there. There's all kinds of teachers there, and you send your kids away for 2 weeks in the summertime, and they're given a Christian worldview, and they get to learn from different Christian apologists that have national platforms. So that's one thing. If you're a parent out there and you're hearing, wow, only 2% have a Christian worldview, and let me tell you something, having a Christian worldview is bigger than just saying, I know Jesus died on the cross for my sins. That's what the 61% are saying. What does it mean to have a Christian worldview? You understand what it means to be a Christian in the world. You understand how to, how your truth about Christianity comes to bear on politics, on arts, on culture, on all things, on relationships, on sexuality. And so send your kids off. And then my good friends, Brett Kunkel and John Stonestreet wrote A Practical Guide to Culture, Helping the Next Generation Navigate Today's World. A simple book. If you're a mom or a dad out there, go through that at the dinner table. Talk about this. If you're a dad, lead out on this in your home and get this, and have your kids go through this and discuss this, because they're going to be shaped by something. Hey, listen, if they don't have a biblical worldview, make no mistake, they have some worldview, and it's probably a secular worldview. And nothing can be more conflicting to say, I believe in Jesus, and couple that with a secular worldview. We want to be able to scrub the secular worldview, give them a Christian worldview to complement. And this is the part of the danger of coming out of the whole purpose that many people thought for years is just become a Christian. So what do you do on Sunday mornings? You hold heaven and hell out to somebody and say, believe in Jesus, and that's all it is Sunday is about just getting saved. Well, we want people to get saved, but it's bigger than that. On Sunday, they need to be understanding how to live with Jesus in the world that they are in, and that's where a biblical worldview can help.
Yeah, and not to disagree with any of that, because I'm fully supportive of that, and I believe that's important. But on a practical note, think about it. Sometimes, sometimes kids are just, understandably, as kids, teenagers, or whatever, they're lazy. I don't want to sit and listen to that. This is too much stuff for my brain. I don't care about that. I want to play this video game, or I want to do that. So you got that element, right? Yes. And but this is bringing me to the place where I think that the other thing, and I think that this is a big factor that's not always mentioned in these surveys, is that these kids, a lot of them, they've grown up in a Christian home. They might have gone to a Christian school, but they've never personally connected with Jesus. And that's the problem. So somehow the relationship thing has to start. Now, the worldview stuff can kind of, help you maybe not go, let's just say a kid is not a believer, and maybe there are some reasons why they are kind of using anyway to say, well, I'm not a Christian, and this can remove those hurdles and all of that. So that can be good. But until somebody meets Christ, and this happened to you, and it happened to me. I grew up with no Christian worldview, and nobody sat me down and gave me a Christian worldview and changed my mind. I met Christ. He changed me, which then began to change my mind. And then I wanted to understand all the implications of my relationship with him and what that meant. So then that was my impetus for learning. I want to go to Summit. I want to go to a place like that. I want to know this stuff.
Absolutely.
So I think there's more to it than just we come up with a good program. A good program can be really great, but it's not the only thing. Kids need to meet Jesus.
Absolutely, I would totally concur. It is. You gotta fall in love with that relationship.
Yeah.
But there are many people out there, I think, that they start off passionate about Christ, and then all of a sudden Christ doesn't really seem relevant to them because they haven't been taught a worldview and how Christ is to relate to the culture.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden what seems so exciting, let's build on that excitement.
Yeah. It's more of it's a discipleship issue.
Yes.
Really, right? Yeah, because we're talking about taking believers who are either just immature or people who have maybe fallen back a little bit because they've lost their passion, and say, no, wait, listen, this is about your whole life. This is about every aspect of life. And so I like that about the whole worldview perspective.
This is Pastor's Perspective. I'm Brian Perez here with Pastor Brian Broderson of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube. Right before the break, we were talking to Tim and Phelan and how he's overwhelmed with politics. And here we have Regina in Riverside. Looks like it's the exact opposite. Is it you, Regina, who has no interest in politics or voting?
Yes, I have. Well, I do both, but okay. I have absolutely no interest in politics.
We ought to put you in touch with Tim.
You can balance each other out, right?
Yeah. And I've heard that as Christians we should be on top of the issues and know what's going on, but I don't care. I just vote for who I like, and that's it. I don't, if a pastor starts to even mention something about politics, I'll just get up and walk out. I don't want to hear it in church. I don't want to hear it at dinner. And I don't have a problem. I don't listen to it. I don't watch the news. So is it wrong for Christians to not be on top of the issues? I mean, because I don't vote by issues. I just vote for who I like.
But what do you mean by who you like, though?
Yeah.
Well, I just vote for the nicest person that I think.
Oh boy!
Like the nicest, the guy who smiles the most, really says the nicest things. Because I think if you're going to vote, voting is good, but if you're going to vote, you have to take the time to inform yourself about the person you're voting for, because you could be voting for the wrong person if it's just like, well, I saw him one time and they seemed really nice. My grandson, who's now almost 14, I think back when he was, I don't know, maybe 12 or something like that, he went to school in New York City. So in New York City, in his, 6th grade or 7th grade or whatever it was, politics were very much a part of the classroom discussion. But he came home and he said that he was going to vote for Biden, and this is before Biden was even running. This is a long time ago. Yeah. But he called him something else. It was really funny. He had a different name for him, but it was Biden that he was talking about. And he said, my daughter said, "Well, why?" And he said, "He just seems like a nice old guy."
Oh boy!
That was the perspective of a 12-year-old. So we don't want to vote based on that. We might as well not vote if we're voting based strictly on that.
It's not like you're voting for your neighbor. It's not like you're voting for who's going to move in next door to me. Oh, that guy seems nice. Yeah. Because of course you want the nice guy living next to you. But we're talking about
so I think voting is a privilege. I mean, it's a privilege that we have. Not everybody gets to vote. You go to China, you don't vote for anything. The government, they have a dictatorship and they do what they want. And they tell you what to do. And if you don't like it, they put you in prison or they dispose of you. So we have this wonderful thing where we actually get to weigh in and we get to determine who's going to make the decisions for us through our vote. So we should be informed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that as well. I mean, so Will Ferrell, here's a funny, nice guy, right? So if he's running for president and he's just nice and he's friendly, but then you have somebody who's really trained on issues, you're just going to vote for Will Ferrell, even though he's not going to be politically ready for that. I also think, as Christians, Regina, we appreciate your question. We think it's great, but unfortunately, I think sometimes the church has made it sound like, you have the gospel over here and you have politics, and obviously the gospel is above and beyond politics totally, but we still have a role to play in our culture, and we've been given the opportunity to be able to vote. And so imagine if every Christian just decided not to vote. What would happen to our culture? Well, the Christian worldview would not be able to influence it the way that it can. So I think that we want to be informed, we want to influence it, but as Christians, we also remember that ultimately politics is not what changes the human heart. The gospel is what changes the human heart. But that doesn't mean that policies don't matter. Policies do matter. They'll give you certain freedoms and they'll take away certain freedoms, as Brian just depicted in China versus America. So this is a privilege that's been given to us, and we should relish that, to be able to be informed, to know what's going on. the danger becomes then on the opposite extreme when Christians really believe that politics is the hope of the world. The only political environment that is the hope of the world is the one where Jesus Christ in the millennium is sitting as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he's ruling and governing with perfect, rulership.
Amen.
Yeah. And I think to Regina's point, I think I agree with her on this. When I go to church, I don't want to hear about the politics. I can turn on the TV and hear politics 24/7. Mm-hmm. When I go to church, I want to hear about God's Word. Mm-hmm. And obviously, God's Word is going to address certain issues. Okay, fine. Then we talk about them. Like I mentioned in a previous program, we talked about abortion last night. We talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her recent passing away. And so we talked about that because it was there, in the text. Her name wasn't in the text, but the topic of God being our creator was there, and then our lives having meaning and our lives having purpose. And of course, so we don't take the life of a human being in the womb just because they're not born yet. We don't consider them not a real person because before I formed you in the womb, God said to Jeremiah, I knew you. So we talked about that, which led to a discussion about abortion, which, some people would say, well, that's a political topic. Well, that's a moral topic. That's a Bible topic. So some of the stuff, inevitably, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah. Regina, thanks for your phone call today on the Pastor's Perspective program. Let's go to Max in Huntington Beach. You're on Pastor's Perspective, Max.
God bless you, pastors. Thank you for taking my call. And this is the first time I call and I get to talk to the 1 minute apologist, Bobby Einstein.
Bobby Einstein?
Yeah. I wish.
Very smart, man. You're very smart. I wish I have your knowledge. Okay. My question is on Revelation 20, and I'm reading from the American Standard Version. It says, I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, and he laid a hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years and cast him. So it's talking about one person because I see it singular. So I'm wondering what happened with his minions, all the other demons. Are they going to be also thrown to the abyss or not?
What do you guys think?
Yeah. Want to speak into that, Pastor Brian? I know you're...
Well, at the end of chapter 19, where right at the very end there, I was just thinking as you were asking that question, at the end of 19, it tells us that, let me turn to the end of 19, it says, the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone, and the rest were killed with the sword which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the throne. So, and then as we turn over to chapter 20, then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit. He takes the hold of the dragon. So I think the rest there, remember this multitude that are coming to fight against Christ is an army of human beings and evil spirits. So I would think that they are all dealt with at that point. But now it's Satan himself that is the final one. He's the last one to be dealt with. That's what I would think.
And do you think this is a literal 1,000 years, or?
I do. Yeah, that's a debated topic among Christians, but I think it's a literal 1,000 years. Yes.
I do too.
All right, Max, thanks so much for your phone call.
Thank you, Max.
Yes. Juanita in Irvine, you're next on Pastor's Perspective. Hello.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you for my call. I was calling because I've been trying to, how can I word it out? I've been really wanting to learn a lot and how all these things that I been wanting to catch up on. I've been reading Natasha Craig's book for keeping your children on God's side. And then I also want to do my own devotionals. I just signed up for Cheryl Broderson's Philippians study program. And then I've also been wanting to get into like Muslim apologetics, just because I have a Muslim boss and I know some people at work, and I've been really getting into that and trying to talk to them about, the Bible and kind of like the Quran and issues there. And so there's all these things that I want to learn and get into, but I also have 2 kids. It's kind of hard to do everything all at once. And so I just wanted to see like how you guys were able to do that, and maybe some advice as to how to prioritize what I should learn first. So I don't know. I just need some advice.
Yeah. What do you think, Bobby?
It's I feel your pain. For many, many years, that's the way knowledge was. I loved knowledge. It became an idol in my life. I mean, learning and studying, and a lot of that was rooted in just the lack of knowledge that I had when I got saved from living the way that I lived. And I will say that it's great to want to learn. I like that you're at least thinking from a practical standpoint that, oh, hey, I know somebody who's a Muslim, so therefore I want to learn Muslim apologetics, versus, somebody who's going, wow, I'm really interested in Confucianism, and you may have never met a Confucian in your entire life. So at least you're thinking practically on how you can study from a useful standpoint. I would say that when it comes to learning, you'll often kind of do the 30,000 foot. So you get a landscape. So what is kind of the overview of the Bible? Learn about that, and learn about. So you're kind of learning, okay, there's 66 books of the Bible, there's 2 Testaments, there's 1,189 chapters in the Bible written by 40 authors on 3 continents in these different languages, Greek and Hebrew, a little bit of Aramaic sprinkled in, and you start getting a little bit of that action, right? Different genres, and you get that big picture, but then you start drilling deep. So you can do the same thing as it relates to doctrine. Get the big picture of Bible doctrine, get the big picture of Christian worldview. And I would say, as you're learning the big picture, look for the emergent silo passion that you want to have, something that you want to go really deep in. It's one of the problems with like general apologetics. You'll always be insecure if you just do general apologetics, because there's always questions that you can't answer. So that's why at some point you might want to become a specialist and go on to a deep dive in a particular area. But where you're at right now, I would just say, take the Bible and learn about the overview of that, learn what it means to grow in Christ, learn Bible doctrine. And, if Islam is something you're interested in as an ancillary worldview issue, study that too.
Brian, would you add anything?
I just discovered my problem. My problem is general apologetics. I just want to know everything, so I end up not knowing anything because there's too many things to know.
Isn't it? But you know what happened? I mean, William Lane Craig talked about, go get a PhD because you'll specialize in something. I'm like, okay, that's a great idea because I've been doing all this general apologetics for years. But then you go get that and you're going, I don't feel like I even understand my topic that well. So I've been studying guilt all these years, and I'm thinking, I'm not really sure I've got my hand around this one word yet. So that's discouraging. So I don't know, Brian.
Well, like Solomon said, the making of many books is weariness to the flesh.
Right? Yes. Yes.
So what do you think, Juanita?
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. It sounds like you're doing great. And
absolutely.
You do have 2 children. And so
I also work a full-time job, so it's kind of trying to fit that in there. So.
Well, we're assuming you're relatively young, so you have some time. Just take it a step at a time.
Yeah. Would you recommend any, like a class or maybe a specific course, just to kind of get me going in the right direction?
Well, certainly you could. I mean, we have a Bible college. We have an online school. You could check out taking one online class or something like that. Bobby's got, what is it you're doing right now?
Yeah, we just released an apologetics crash course. If you go to 1minuteapologist.com, you can see that. It's got like 8 sessions and it's short. We've got one coming out on evangelism, mental health, and different things like that. There's lots of stuff out there. I think that this whole area, though, is it's great that you're hungry. That's what I love. I love when people call up and they're just hungry to learn more.
Yeah. And, you are living in an extraordinary time as far as opportunity goes because of all the online stuff, which, that just didn't exist 20 years ago, right? And now you can kind of almost anything you want. You can find it online. And
hey, remember back in the day, like if you wanted a sermon, like, I'm going to date myself, but like tapes, you go to church and, you had to buy the tape series and it'd be like $40-$50 for, like for $5,000, get Pastor Brian Broderson's teaching through the book of Jude.
That it was 6,000.
It was 6,000. Yeah. What a great retort!
I saw one for 10,000 on eBay. So they're
boy, you remember that? So I'm kind of glad it's free. I mean, I'm sure that the pastors can miss some of that, but.
Well, Juanita, thank you so much for your phone call, and that is about all the time we have on today's program. The music's going to start any second now. We'll be here again tomorrow to answer your questions on the Bible and the Christian faith, so give us a call then. We open up the lines about 7 minutes before 3 o'clock Pacific time so that you can call with your questions, and we'd love to hear from you. Tomorrow, 888-564-6173 is the phone number. For Pastor Brian Broderson and Dr. Bobby Conway, I'm Brian Perez. Have a good evening. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.